The comparative cultural studies seminar had been routine until Professor Zalvin announced the final project. Each species would present a traditional game from their homeworld that embodied risk or danger. The Crithian student demonstrated edge walking, a ceremonial dance performed near cliff edges, requiring perfect balance. The Vex delegation showed thought maze, a mental challenge that could cause temporary disorientation if failed. Then it was humanity's turn. James Mitchell stood before the class with an unsettling smile. So, I'm going to show you a game called Russian Roulette. He placed a strange metal device on the table, a revolver, though none of the aliens recognized it as a weapon yet. This, James explained, holding up the gun, is a firearm, specifically a 6-chamber revolver. He opened the cylinder, showing 6 empty chambers. It shoots a projectile at lethal velocity using explosive propellant. The Crithian student, Vel 9, tilted her head. A weapon? But this is meant to be a game presentation. It is a game, James said. He held up a single bullet, the metal glinting under the classroom lights. This is live ammunition. 1 bullet. He loaded it into a chamber and spun the cylinder with a metallic whirring sound. The cylinder randomizes which chamber will fire next. Professor Zalvin's tentacles stiffened. Mr. Mitchell, I'm not certain I understand. The game is simple, James continued, placing the gun to his own temple. Each player takes turns pulling the trigger. 1 chamber has the bullet. 5 are empty. 1 in 6 chance of death each pull. The classroom erupted in chaos. Death, shrieked a Quellic student, his protective membrane instantly deploying. You're describing suicide. Or survival, James said calmly, the gun still pressed against his head. That's the game. You pull the trigger and find out. Professor Zalvin lunged forward, his voice modulator crackling with alarm. Mr. Mitchell, put that weapon down immediately. This is not a game. This is a murder device. On Earth, we call it a game of chance, James explained, finally lowering the weapon. Usually played by people with nothing left to lose, or trying to prove something. Sometimes for money, sometimes just for the thrill. Vel9's scales had turned a shocked white. Your species plays games where the failure state is death? Voluntarily? Well, not legally in most places anymore, James admitted. But historically, yes. And it still happens. A Morphean student raised 3 trembling hands. But why? What could possibly motivate such madness? James shrugged. Desperation. Bravado. Sometimes just to feel alive. Humans have a complicated relationship with mortality. Some of us like to gamble with it. That's not gambling, Professor Zalvin said, his voice hollow. That's insanity. Maybe, James agreed. But you asked for a dangerous game from our culture. This is about as dangerous as it gets. He ejected the bullet and set both items on the table. The psychological element is interesting too. Each click of an empty chamber increases survival confidence, but also increases the statistical likelihood that the next chamber has the bullet. The fear escalates with each pull. The classroom remained frozen in horror. A brave Vex student managed to speak. Has anyone ever won this game? If you survive all 6 pulls, technically yes, James said. But usually people stop after a few rounds. Or, don't stop. He paused meaningfully. The mortality rate is pretty high. Professor Zalvin was frantically updating his datapad. I'm adding a new requirement to the syllabus. Human students must have their game presentations pre-approved by 3 faculty members and a psychological evaluation board. That seems excessive, James protested. Excessive. Vel9's voice cracked. You just explained a recreational activity with a 16% mortality rate per round. What do humans consider actually dangerous? James thought for a moment. Well, there's this thing called free solo climbing, where you scale 1,000-foot cliffs without any safety equipment. One mistake, and you fall to your death. Or base jumping off buildings with a parachute that might not open. Oh, and cave diving and underwater systems where you can get lost and drown. Stop, Professor Zalvin commanded, his skin cycling through colors of distress. Just stop talking. The professor pulled up humanity's psychological profile, his tentacles shaking as he typed. Species exhibits pathological comfort with mortality. Recreational activities include voluntary exposure to lethal scenarios. Recommend immediate classification as extreme risk tolerance, category Omega. Further study needed to understand how this species survived to achieve spaceflight. James packed up his presentation materials, completely missing the existential crisis he'd triggered in every alien present. So, he asked cheerfully, "Does this count as my final project?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Somewhere in the Galactic Census Bureau, a new warning label was being drafted for humanity. Warning: this species plays games with death. Approach cultural exchanges with extreme caution.